Hi, welcome to Durham College Student Academic Learning Services, or SALS, Essentials Workshop Editing Strategies for College Writing. My name is Eric, and I'm the ESL Writing Specialist in SALS. In this workshop, we're going to discuss editing and how it can help you in your academic writing. To do that, we'll talk about the importance of editing. I'll allow you some practice in your own editing. We'll discuss common grammar errors that people tend to make. We'll look at the process of editing. I'll discuss some strategies that might be helpful to you personally, and then I'll give you some ideas about how you can get further help. Read this sentence. Now, when you read this, did you see the error? If you're not seeing the error, there's a clear error in here. Read it one more time. Okay, if you're still not able to see the error, don't worry. Only about 10% of the audience generally can see this error immediately. I'm going to highlight each word and just read as I highlight. Okay, now did you see the error? The word "the" is used twice before the word "spring." And all of you, I'm sure, can see that that's not correct. But some of you didn't notice that in the beginning. It was only when we highlighted the sentence word for word. And one of the big differences here is that when you're reading for information, then it's quite different from reading for editing. And what happens in our brain is when we're reading for information, we tend to read in chunks, usually 3 or 4 words at a time. And this is why our brain is able to just skip right over the double "thes." And when I slowed you down and had you look at each word individually, then the error is really easy to see. And that's one of the keys to editing, is noticing and reading differently than you do when you're reading a textbook or a novel or a magazine. I want you to look at these sentences. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to read through. You can see the number of errors in each one. And as you look at the sentences, see if you can catch the errors. I'll give you the 30 seconds to go through all of them, and then we'll move on, and we'll come back to them later and make sure that they're correct. Okay, I'm going to move on. But remember, we'll come back to these same sentences later on and make sure we all know which errors are there. So now we'll discuss some of the common grammar errors that people tend to make. So the way these work is, for number 1, for example, the title of the error is in bold on the top, and then there's an example of the problem. So in the first case, no comma after introductory phrases or words, you'll notice that under the car, you might be thinking we need a comma after car, and you'd be right. We found the cat. Under the car is the introduction. Sometimes an introduction can be a single word, like suddenly, but in this case, it's a location. So usually an introduction is a time, a place, or a situation that introduces the sentence. In this case, the sentence is, we found the cat. The second example is a run-on sentence. The man walked into the store, he didn't buy anything. Now you may notice after store, there's a problem because we're starting a completely new full sentence. So in fact, we have 2 sentences here which run into each other, and so it's called a run-on. One way to fix it is to add a comma, but if you add a comma, we also have to add what are called fanboys. And fanboys is just a way to remember, it's a mnemonic device to remember the coordinating conjunctions that we use between 2 sentences with a comma. So for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. These are the fanboys. A sentence fragment. When I walked into the room, you probably noticed that this is not a complete idea. If the sentence had been, I walked into the room, it would have been fine. But because of the word when, we've added a condition. When I walked into the room, then the reader expects to see what happened. So we add a comma and an independent clause. Subject-verb agreement. The whole team are going to Europe this year. So in this case, you'll probably notice that team is singular, the whole team. That's only talking about one team, so we have to change are into is. The whole team is going to Europe. If we said the team members are going to Europe, we would have been okay because we have a plural subject. The idea here is that the subject and the main verb have to match. Unnecessary shift in person. When one is healthy, you shouldn't worry about wealth. You might notice that in the first part of the sentence we've used one, and in the second part we've used you. And either way would be okay, but not mixing. So we could say, when one is healthy, one should not worry about wealth. And you could also say, when you're healthy, you shouldn't worry about wealth. The only difference between using you or one in this case would be the level of formality, where the word one implies a more formal situation. So for formal writing, as you'll be doing in college, generally we try to maintain a formal tone. So using one would be correct in this situation. The next example is discussing possessive apostrophe error. One of these represents one student's pens, and the other one represents many students' pens, singular and plural. So if you guessed that this one was the singular one, referring to a single student, you're correct. And this is plural for many students. Tense shift. I ate breakfast, then walked to school. You'll notice that the two main verbs in the sentence don't match. The first one, ate, is past tense, and the second one, walk, is present tense. Generally, when you're writing a sentence, we need to have the two tenses matching. So, for example, you could say, I ate breakfast and walked to school. Or, if you wanted it to be a present tense sentence, I eat breakfast and walk to school. It's rare for you to mix the tenses inside one sentence, unless you're referring to something in the past, but speaking of it in the present tense, or talking about time travel. In general, you're going to keep it to one tense within a sentence. It's an its error. So if you look at the two blanks in the sentence, which its goes into which blank? IT apostrophe S is a contraction, not a possession. So it's a contraction for it is. If we read the sentence that way, you can see it is not the time for the bank to balance its budget. It makes much more sense than if you switch it and you said it's not the time for the bank to balance it is budget. Doesn't make any sense. So it has to be this way. The second form, ITS, that's the possessive form. Wrong word choice. So in this sentence, there are some words that are not correct. If you read it, everyone except the principal complimented the committee on its work. It sounds fine, but several of the words are incorrect. Can you identify them? If you said this word, accept, you're right. Next one, principal. The next one, complimented. And the last one, it's. All right, so the words are not correct. So accept means to receive something, to accept it, to take it. Except means to exclude it, to not include it. So everyone except the principal. In this case, principal should be spelled P-A-L, because principal in this spelling means the main thing. So for example, the principal argument, the main idea, the principal idea. And as a memory device, if you think about PAL at the end of the word principal, P-A-L is the same meaning as friend. PAL equals friend, and a friend is a person. So a principal, P-A-L, is a person. Complemented. Complemented in this spelling means, for example, two colors complement each other, or this food complements this wine, for example. Complemented with an I is when somebody says something nice about something. And the committee on its work, ITS is the possessive form, so this should be the committee's work, the committee on its work. So let's go back now and review the errors from the sentences that I showed you earlier. In this first sentence, you can see that there were 4 errors. The first error was the misspelling of beginning, should be double N in there. After century, 21st century, there should be a comma because that's a dependent clause, or you can think of it as an introduction. We have seen many changes, so there are many, so there has to be plural for changes. In technology and how it's used. So how technology is used, it is. We need to have it apostrophe S or it is. Okay, for the second sentence, you'll notice probably that the word begun should be began. The internet began a little more than 25 years ago. So if you are, you could either have you are or you apostrophe RE for the contraction. In your early 30s, 30s would be spelled without the apostrophe, just number 3, number 0, and then a small s. And for the last sentence, when I think of all the errors I've made, so errors should be plural, not with apostrophe, so just plural. And we need a comma after made because it's a dependent clause. Now let's take a look at the editing process. So when you finish your document, finish writing your document, you want to check to make sure that the assignment has been completed, that you use the rubric as a checklist. Make sure that your tone is correct, that you're organized, smooth transitions between the ideas, and make sure that you're using clear language. And then after you finish that, then you look at the grammar, spelling, punctuation, word choice, and so on. You don't want to spend extra time editing some paragraphs that you later end up removing. That's just wasted time. So here are some important strategies for when you're learning the skill of editing. Number 1 is find out what your errors are. What kinds of errors are you making? So you need feedback in order to do that. And you'll be getting feedback from your professors. You can book appointments at SALS to get feedback on your writing. But that's really important, that kind of feedback. You also need to know how to fix the errors. Once you see them, you know you're making them, you need to know how to fix them. You need to allow enough time for proofreading and editing, because if you don't, what happens is you may write the assignment and just submit it straight away, but it could be filled with errors. And that will either confuse the professor or just look very careless. So you don't want to do that. And I recommend you take a break after writing the assignment. Go away from it for a little while and come back, because really writing the assignment and editing it are 2 completely different roles. So it might be better to just take a little break before you come back as an editor. Read your work out loud. You might notice something when you hear it and see it at the same time, and realize that there's an error, something you didn't expect. And read more slowly than you usually read. The reason for this is because if you're reading a novel or a textbook even, in those situations you're reading for information, like I was saying earlier. So you tend to do more chunking, you read quicker. However, if you are reading for editing, you're watching for spelling, grammar, punctuation, word choice, all kinds of things, formatting, and so on. If you slow down while you're learning this skill of watching for all of these possible problems, that'll give your brain a little bit more time to find these kinds of problems. The other tip I can give is if you're ever reading something that you've written, and as you're reading, if you hesitate, I would stop right there, because chances are when you hesitated, something your brain was expecting wasn't there. And so just stop and look very carefully in the area that you hesitated in. If you'd like more help with editing strategies, ask your professor. They're always willing to give feedback. You'll also notice that when you receive assignments back, sometimes they'll actually edit for you. They'll show you where the mistakes are. SALS Online. So we have resources in SALS Online for editing skills, including a full editing skills workshop that you could do in your own time at your own pace. Or you can take a remotely delivered workshop through SALS in editing skills. There are other workshops too that are connected to editing, like the punctuation review, grammar matters, essay writing. So these are all related to editing skills too. You can connect with us at SALS through these social media platforms. And please feel free to call or email with any questions regarding this presentation or comments. Thank you for attending. I hope you found this helpful, and good luck with your semester.